Imagine 12 straight generations of brothers and sisters marrying each other and having children. According to history, this extreme inbreeding produced one of the most mesmerizingly beautiful women to ever walk the earth. How is that biologically possible when modern science says it should have ended in disaster? Thousands of years ago, the rulers of Egypt weren't just kings, they were worshipped as literal living gods on earth. But to keep that absolute power, they hid a dark, twisting secret behind the massive stone walls of their palaces. What really happened in those dark, silent royal chambers when a pharaoh locked the door with his own biological sister? History wants you to think it was a twisted romance or a taboo scandal. But the truth is much more chilling. It was a terrifying, mandatory, holy duty. They weren't marrying for love, and they weren't marrying for pleasure. They were desperately trying to protect a sacred, divine bloodline from being contaminated by the outside world. Let's look at the evidence and find out what really happened. Picture Egypt, thousands of years ago. Not the Egypt of pyramids and mummies you already know a little about. Go further back to when it all began. Around 3000 BCE, a strip of land along the Nile River turned into one of the first great civilizations on Earth. The people there believed their king wasn't just a king. He was a god, walking around in human form, ruling over everyone else. They called him a pharaoh. Before 3000 BCE, Egypt wasn't even one country. It was two, a northern half and a southern half, each with its own ruler. Then, one king, from the south, conquered the north and jammed both halves together into a single kingdom. To prove it, he wore both crowns stacked on top of each other, one inside the other, like a trophy. That double crown became the symbol of the very first pharaoh. But a crown alone doesn't make a man a god. So the Egyptians borrowed one of their own myths. They believed the sky god Horus, shown as a falcon, was the true ruler of Egypt. Every living pharaoh was declared to be Horus himself, walking around on two legs. And when a pharaoh died, he didn't just die. He transformed into Osiris, the god of the afterlife, and his son became the new Horus, taking the throne. Death wasn't the end of the story, it was a promotion. The king who unified Egypt is usually identified as Narmer, and the woman linked to him in ancient inscriptions is a queen named Mentuhotep, a name that literally means the goddess Neith is satisfied. Many historians believe she wasn't from the south, where Narmer ruled. They think she came from the delta, the north, the very kingdom Narmer had just conquered. Think about what that means. Narmer didn't just defeat the north in battle, he married into it. By taking a northern-born queen as his wife, he fused the two halves of Egypt together, not just on a map, but in his own family. Their children would carry the blood of both the winners and the losers of that war, which made rebellion a lot harder to justify. You can't easily raise an army against a king who is, biologically, half your own. Around 2000 BCE, Egypt had broken apart again, split into two rival kingdoms fighting each other, almost like the earlier war had never really ended. A king named Mentuhotep II won that fight. He defeated the rival kingdom and pieced Egypt back into one country, just like Narmer had done 1,000 years earlier. Because of this, he's remembered as the founder of an entirely new era of Egyptian history. And when he took the throne of a reunited Egypt, the records are clear about who he chose as one of his queens. His own sister, a woman named Neferu. That's the first sibling marriage historians agree really happened, and it opened a door that never fully closed again. A century and a half later, a king named Senusret II followed the same path, marrying more than one of his own sisters. One of them gave birth to his son, Senusret III, a pharaoh remembered as one of the most powerful rulers Egypt ever produced. A few generations after that, a woman named Sobek-Neferu became the first confirmed female pharaoh in Egyptian history, ruling in her own right, and she's believed to have come from that same tangled family line. By the time Egypt entered its golden age, the New Kingdom, sibling marriage wasn't a strange exception anymore. It was becoming something closer to expected. Before we get to what happened next, quick context on why this practice felt so unquestionable to them. Osiris and Isis were two of the most important gods in the entire Egyptian religion. Osiris ruled over the afterlife, the god who judged the dead and decided who lived on in the next world. Isis was his sister and his wife, a goddess of magic and motherhood, worshipped for thousands of years, even outside Egypt, all the way into the Roman Empire. To the Egyptians, these weren't distant myths. They were the most real, most powerful beings in the universe. And here's something that will actually shock you, sitting right there in the ancient records. The Egyptians didn't just accept sibling marriage among their gods. They told a much stranger story about it. According to Egyptian myth, Isis and Osiris weren't just brother and sister who later married. Ancient texts claim their union began before either of them was even born, that they loved each other while still inside their mother's womb. Think about that for a second. This wasn't a rumor whispered in the streets. It was official religious belief, written down and retold for thousands of years, forming the entire justification the pharaohs later used to marry their own sisters. If the gods themselves were said to be bonded before birth, then a pharaoh marrying his sister wasn't breaking a rule. In their eyes, he was simply living out the same sacred pattern the gods had already set. That single myth is the hinge the entire practice swings on. Every pharaoh who ever married a sister, all the way up to Cleopatra's own family, was pointing back to this one story as their justification. So here's the real reason, the one actual historians point to, backed by records, not myth. Yes, the gods gave them a story to hide behind. But underneath the religious language, sibling marriage was solving a much more practical problem. Keeping power in one bloodline. Period. Full stop. Here's the part almost nobody explains. In ancient Egypt, property and status could pass down through women too, not just through sons. That meant if a princess married someone outside the family, her husband could suddenly gain a legitimate claim to the throne, just by marriage. Marry the wrong outsider into the family, and you've handed him a shortcut to power he never earned. Marrying your own sister closed that loophole completely. No outside husband. No rival family suddenly holding a claim to the crown. No in-laws waiting for their moment. The wealth, the land, the throne. All of it stayed locked inside one family, generation after generation, with nobody new allowed in. And there's an even more interesting layer to this when you look at Cleopatra's family specifically, the Ptolemies. They weren't even Egyptian. They were Macedonian Greeks who took over after Alexander the Great died. And in Greek culture, sibling marriage was considered deeply taboo, not sacred at all. So when Ptolemy II married his sister Arsinoe II, it wasn't just copying Egyptian tradition. It was a calculated, almost theatrical move, a way of saying, we are not bound by ordinary rules, Greek or Egyptian. We are something above both. People were so struck by it that they gave him the nickname Philadelphus, the one who loves his sibling, and it stuck to him for the rest of history. So the real answer isn't romantic, and it isn't purely religious either. It's colder than both. Marrying your sister was the single most effective way to guarantee that no outsider, no ambitious husband, no foreign prince, no rival noble family could ever walk in and take what your bloodline had spent generations building. Let's go back to the hook's question. After 12 generations of siblings marrying, how was Cleopatra born? And why weren't her kids born unhealthy? First, a quick correction. Cleopatra wasn't actually known for stunning looks. Coins made during her own lifetime show a strong, sharp face. Nothing like the most beautiful woman alive myth. What made her powerful was her mind. She reportedly spoke close to a dozen languages. That's the real story, not her face. Now, the biology. Cleopatra's mom and dad were brother and sister. That made her the product of about 250 years of the same family marrying itself, generation after generation. Here's the surprising part. You'd expect that much inbreeding to cause serious health problems. But researchers studying her family tree found no clear proof of birth defects or health disasters in her bloodline. Compare that to a different Egyptian family, Tutankhamun. His parents were also brother and sister, and DNA tests in 2010 proved it. His body showed real problems. A club foot, a cleft palate, a curved spine. Same kind of marriage, two very different results. Why? Scientists think it comes down to luck. Which bad genes were already hiding in a family before the sibling marriages even started? If the Ptolemies got lucky early on, the damage other families suffered just never showed up in theirs. So Cleopatra wasn't proof that inbreeding is safe. She was proof that it doesn't always go the way science expects.